Welcome to Volume 1 of Impact, Leadership, and Goddess. I actually started this series earlier today on YouTube, and a lot of things went wrong, so here we are again. This series as a whole, is about addressing your spirituality in the context of business and leadership. More specifically than that, this series as a whole is about finding out what is missing on the inside that you require for your next levels of leadership, impact, and legacy on the outside. So again, this whole series is about your spirituality in the context of business and leadership, and more specifically, finding out what you might be missing on the inside that you require for your next levels of leadership, impact, and legacy on the outside. If you are a spiritually oriented CEO or founder, executive or leader who is also desiring to create legacy level impact, this is for you. Now, today we're talking about Impact, Leadership, and God, Volume 1, Spiritual Fracture, Core Wounds, and Separation from God. We're going to be talking about spiritual integration or wholeness versus spiritual fracture, and specifically how this plays out in both your own spirituality and in your business and leadership. We will be touching upon the symptoms of spiritual fracture, as well as some paths to spiritual wholeness, and how this specifically impacts your business life. And then at the very end, we'll be pivoting into the 4 to 5 keys, depending how you count, the 4 or 5 keys required for spiritual integration and legacy level impact. So take a couple of deep breaths, ground in, feel yourself in your chair, in your seat right now, bringing yourself into your body and into present time. Step 1, breathing. Step 2, connecting to your body and the here and now. And then briefly calling in God, Goddess as you know it, or them. So before we jump in today, we'll be looking at what's missing on the inside that you require for your next levels of leadership, impact, and legacy on the outside. Before we jump into today's topic, which is spiritual fracture or spiritual disintegration, let's talk about what spiritual integration is. And again, I don't really have a script in front of me. I have a couple of loose, super loose notes, but nothing rock solid. Spiritual integration is when, I'm going to give you a situation. Spiritual integration is when you have been on your own spiritual path for years or decades, and you are able to use that to both integrate your emotional self with your higher self. You're able to use that spiritual path to digest and process your traumas, your emotions, your personal belief systems, as well as being able to use the spiritual path you've been on to see the big picture of the legacy you're here to make, and then to tangibly and actually bring your spiritual gifts out into your impact in the collective. That's very loose. That's very rough. That's what spiritual integration is for our working purposes today. So based on that, what is spiritual disintegration? What is spiritual fracture? Edit that comment. Based on this, how does spiritual integration connect to legacy level impact? Let's say that you know that you are here to create legacy level impact, meaning that you're here to create an impact for those who come after, whether that's in your business, in your team, in the lineage of what you give to the collective. You're here to create legacy level impact. When you're spiritually integrated, you're more clear on what that impact is, and you use your life force and your energy and your vitality much more effectively to create that impact in the collective. So when you're truly spiritually integrated, again, you're much more clear on what that legacy level impact truly is for you. And you also use your life force, your energy, your vitality like 1,000 times more effectively to create that impact on the collective. So, what then is spiritual disintegration or spiritual fracture, right? And we can now assume that that disconnects you or breaks you off both from God, and I'm using God as a very rough marker today, but that spiritual fracture both breaks you off from God as well as from your legacy level impact. So, what then is spiritual fracture? Spiritual fracture is when you go on the hero or heroine's journey, whether that's a journey through religion, organized religion, or even things like yoga, meditation, Buddhism, medicine circles, the divine feminine. And you come out and you have one of two problems. And the two big problems that you can come out of this that are the mega signs of spiritual disintegration are, and this is like if you've been on that journey for 5, 10, 20 years and have one or both of these problems, not if it's like your first 2 months. Either you have really, really, really big mood swings and are highly emotional and reactive, and as a potential result of that are terrified that if people saw who you really were, they wouldn't like you, that if your team or those that you work with knew you as who you are, they would run away screaming. Another really, really clear scenario of spiritual fracture is you've been on the journey, you have the spiritual gifts, but you're either murky about what your spiritual gifts are, or you literally do not know how to bring them out to make the impact that you want to make on the collective. Again, we're going fast and quick here today. There was originally a very long video I did, and YouTube kind of ate it. So here we are. So, how does spiritual fracture relate to the impact that you do or don't make? Short form, it thwarts your leadership, it thwarts your communication skills and your communication style, and it absolutely makes you totally, totally, totally fuzzy on what to do and when in terms of leadership, in terms of impact, in terms of legacy. So specifically, how does spiritual fracture show up? Okay. Some of the really tangible signs and symptoms of spiritual fracture: you're burnt out. You're at the top of the game. You have the success. You've been at your business game for years or decades, but you're burnt out. You feel like your success is way too hard won. You have fatigue. You have total exhaustion. Another way that spiritual fracture can show up is you have fear and shame over who you are. Fear and shame that if your colleagues or team or those under you truly knew who you were, how you felt, how you were expressing yourself, it would all fall apart. Another way that this manifests is big emotions or mood swings. Like, despite the spiritual journey you've just been on, it's either like, why can't I keep my shit together? Pardon my French, but why can't I keep my shit together? Why are my emotions so big? Why are my mood swings so big? Or on the other side, you might have like a fear or a terror or an anxiety or a reticence to feel anything at all. Finally, another way that this shows up is that you've had the spiritual journey, but you're either murky on what your gifts are, and I'll give you an example of this in a moment, or you're murky on how to use your gifts skillfully, specifically in business, whether you're an entrepreneur or towards the top of the corporate food chain. There's a murkiness of like, I know that I'm kind of intuitive, but how do I use that to create an impact? There's a murkiness on that kind of thing. Okay. Now, I did have two really, really, really specific scenarios to hand you guys, and I did mention them before, but I'll dip my toes back in for this. So there's two sort of archetypes of how spiritual fracture or spiritual disintegration very, very, very specifically can show up for you. Scenario one, you've had a massive spiritual journey and you know that you've gleaned gifts from it. Gifts that you would love to use to shift your impact in business / in the world. But no matter how hard you try, this impact is not happening. You're feeling burnt out, exhausted, stressed out, and frustrated. You're scared you will never make the difference that you are meant to make. Especially scared or afraid or worried that you'll never make the impact that you're meant to make for those who come after you. And or, scenario two, you've had a massive spiritual journey, but you still are emotionally shattered or fractured. You're supposed to be there emotionally the way that you're there in the rest of your life, the way that you're at the pinnacle of your career, the way that you're at the top of your game with your family. But inside you feel like a total mess. You might be having big emotions and really huge mood swings, or worse yet, you might be afraid to feel your feelings at all. And you might even be secretly scared that if colleagues, clients, family, friends, or your team members saw who you truly are and what you truly feel, they'd run away screaming. Okay. Is this you? Take a deep breath if this is you. Okay. So we're going to talk about what causes this. What causes this? What causes spiritual disintegration? What causes spiritual fracture? So the root cause of so many things is childhood trauma. And when I say childhood trauma being a root cause of this, I am speaking to the very big, very obvious things like being physically or sexually abused in your childhood. But I'm also speaking to a whole host of other nuanced things like emotional manipulation by a parent or parents, emotional neglect, some form of abandonment, emotional trauma. All of these are equally valid too and absolutely have an equal impact in feeling shattered, fractured, broken, unable or challenged by mood regulation down the road. The second big root cause of spiritual disintegration or spiritual fracture is religious trauma and misguided programming, especially from Abrahamic or Judeo-Christian religions. Some examples of this are Judaism and the punitive God. I will smite thee, I will, take thee down. We are God's chosen people. Everybody else is unchosen or not chosen. So the idea or concept or internalization of a punishing God. Harsh rules within religion. Other distortions in, Judeo-Christian religions. One quick one that comes to mind is, the idea of original sin. I mean, come on, imagine you're walking around your whole life like, I am bad, I am bad, I am not worthy, I am a sinner. Of course, things like that are going to create fractures and splits and dissociations down the line. Of course. Another aspect of religious trauma that can feed into this is the obvious of actual cults, which are not religions, but cults or even cult-like aspects in corners of organized religion. Now, that's not really what this video is about, but even pockets of Judaism and pockets of Christianity absolutely can tiptoe into cult-like behaviors. And those pockets or corners that have the cult-like behaviors can absolutely feed into spiritual fracture. Okay. All of these core causes can run really, really, really deep and take months or even years of processing and integration to unwind. So I'm just mentioning it today because we're going to be focusing on the repair and the wholeness aspect of this primarily. Although when I do a part 2 on this series when I do a part 2 on this series, there will be more of a discussion of trauma and its impact on leadership. Okay. So there's also secondary causes to this, and secondary causes of spiritual disintegration or spiritual fracture. Say that you've had, say that you're manifesting with some of the symptoms of spiritual disintegration or spiritual fracture in your now. Say that that's going on. Say that that's showing up. Say that you're manifesting with that in the now. I'm drinking coffee. Say that that's manifesting in the now. Well, you have your root cause, right? But then there's secondary causes that can make this worse. And some of the secondary causes are disintegrative spiritual processes, especially without psychological integration. And these include things like going on a medicine journey with a shaman, but then never receiving psychological support or psychological integration after. This can show up like narcissistic big dick energy mentors and coaches. And then, you have a narcissist as your mentor, and that just recreates all the drama. This can even include relying on things like psychotherapy alone. Now, I'm a big fan of psychotherapy, and I think it can be incredibly valuable. But the problem with trying to fix spiritual fracture issues with psychotherapy alone is that it disavows the magical and the spiritual and the energetic. And in fact, if you go to your therapist and saying, I'm talking to God, half of the time you're going to walk out of there with a diagnosis and prescription, and it's not going to address the real situation. Okay. So take a beat. Okay. The final secondary cause of spiritual disintegration under this first list is aspects of the New Age or self-help worlds. And especially the aspects of self-help or New Age, the body isn't real, we must transcend the flesh. Or, your emotions should not be touched, be all love and light. The love and light mentality. I'm laughing at that right now. The false love and light mentality, and denial of the body, from bodily needs like food and exercise and rest to denial of emotions in the body. All of this can either create spiritual fracture or feed into a pre-existing childhood-based spiritual fracture. Now, there's a couple other secondary causes of spiritual fracture, and I'm going to keep this brief, but they include trying to bring your spiritual gifts into the world using only part of the equation, like having your spiritual journey, knowing that you're here for legacy level impact, and then trying to fix it using just one tool in the toolkit, saying, well, now I'm just going to go to therapy and make my next level of impact, or I'm just going to go to therapy and make my next level of impact. When you try to take this approach, it's like driving a car that's missing wheels. I'll just leave it at that. It's like you have one wheel on your car and you're wondering why it won't drive. I'll leave it at that. And the final secondary cause of spiritual disintegration is not being connected to your higher self and failing to bring that into the equation. And here's why this matters. This one's really important, and it's so important that I almost accidentally skipped over it in this transmission and skipped over it in this equation. Okay. You have your everyday or conditioned human self. This is fine. It's like the part of you that drives the car. Some might even call it the ego. It's not bad. It's fine. We want it. And then you have your higher self. And your higher self is not God, but your higher self is like the aspect of yourself that is most connected to God. To grossly oversimplify, your higher self is the aspect of you that is most connected to God. And what happens when you do, this is a detour, what happens when you do bring your higher self into the spiritual integration journey is that you're moving through the whole journey from a lens of wholeness and not brokenness. When you bring your higher self into the spiritual integration journey, you're moving through the whole journey through a lens of wholeness and not brokenness. So, how that goes outwards, and again, this is a detour, is that, okay, more doors open for you. Let's say you want to create a massive impact in the collective, but you need certain doors to open. Navigate from your higher self, more doors open, more synchronicities arise, for example. Okay. The other thing is you're moving from wholeness from day one. So you don't need to go through like an 18-step healing process and then all the business parts too to get to where you want to be. You have some of the insights that you would have as if you were already healed, and you can move with some of that from day one, which simply means that results happen a lot faster. Okay, we'll put a pause on that and we'll go back to the main topic. I just wanted to say that for you. Okay. So the third secondary cause of spiritual disintegration or spiritual fracture is not bringing your higher self into the process. So if you're here with me live or on the replay, you've obviously tried to do a lot of things to fix this. And in essence, all of the things that you've tried to do to fix this are akin to trying to drive your car with one wheel, your car towards legacy level impact with one wheel and not four. Okay. So if you're here, here's what you've tried to do to fix this, and it's actually made it worse. Okay. One, you've pushed harder on your spiritual path. If only I meditate more. If only I go to church more. If only I go on another retreat. If only I buy another book. If only I do yoga more. And the problem is that this neglects the other pieces of the puzzle you need to address. It can also burn you out and physically or spiritually exhaust you and make you hate the spiritual practices that you once loved. Okay. Number two, the second thing that you might have tried that has made this worse. Gone to a shaman, medicine ceremony, or big dick energy, yes, I said it, mindset coach, because they seem to have all the answers. Now, I'm not against shamans or medicine ceremonies. I'm talking about the flavor of shaman, medicine ceremony, or even coach that has the I know it all vibe. The biggest issue with this is that this direction neglects psychological integration and dances around your core wounding. And when you dance around your core wounding in this process, it's like, I'm going to say it, you guys, it's like having a pile of shit and putting glitter on top. And you could put all the glitter on top of all the ceremonies and all the ruffles and frills and bells and still have all the problems festering underneath. So that's the biggest problem with this path. The other big issue with this is frequently the mentors that have the I know it all energy, my answer is always right energy, the self-proclaimed guru energy, frequently they're also narcissistic, and this just feeds into and recreates childhood wounds. And what happens is you get somewhere with them, you get one step ahead with these kinds of teachers, you make a little bit of progress on your path, but because it's feeding right back into the childhood wound, your cycle of spiritual disintegration starts all over again. Yeah. Okay. Oh, and the last one. No, sorry, there's two more. The next two that you've tried, if you're here, is you've tried to rely on strategy, business strategy, or leadership coaching alone. This one's not terrible, but it neglects your authentic identity, your psyche, and your higher self. It just neglects all the internal parts that you need. And finally, you might have tried to go to talk therapy and reason your way through. And the core issue with this is that we are speaking about God and we are speaking about the realm of spirit. And we're not speaking about ration and reason alone. And if you've been on the kind of deep, profound spiritual journey that I know that you have been, and you want to create your mark on the collective, that legacy level impact on the collective, you're not going to get there just through the more rational aspects of therapy. And, imagine that you go into your therapy session saying, I'm talking to God and God is telling me to ... Half the time, You're going to walk out of there with a prescription and a diagnosis. Okay, let that land. I'm not saying not to go to therapy. I'm saying don't rely on it alone on this path. To be clear, I'm not saying skip therapy. I'm saying don't rely on it alone. So how do we fix this? How do you and I walk on this path towards spiritual integration and how that flows into legacy level impact? How do we do this? It begins by honoring that you're going to need to address your psyche, your spiritual gifts, your connection to God, your connection to your own higher self, and your physical body for this repair to actually occur. I'm going to say that again. How do we fix this? How do we walk a path towards spiritual integration and how that flows into legacy level impact? It begins by honoring that you must address your psyche, your spiritual gifts, your connection to God, your connection to your own higher self, as well as your body for this repair to actually occur. And here are the 5 things broken down that you need to address for spiritual integration to occur. Okay, 1, psyche. Addressing your psyche, especially at the level of early childhood trauma and core wounds, and integrating lost parts on that level. This includes childhood traumas, specific adult traumas, body-based clearing of these, belief systems, and reprogramming, as well as how these things specifically flow into your leadership style and communication patterns in the present day. 2, the second thing we need to address for spiritual integration to occur, your spiritual gifts. Everyone's favorite, your spiritual gifts. One part of this is clarifying what your spiritual gifts are and what gifts you have gleaned from your spiritual journey. And the second part is obviously how you're most meant to bring these gifts out into the world. So this covers everything from what your specific spiritual gifts are to how you're meant to bring them out in business or leadership, how you're meant to bring them out in your organization or on your team, how you're meant to bring them out in the world at large. For some of you guys, how your spiritual gifts even apply to your family system, leaving a lineage for those who come after, and your gifts in leadership, leading like a gifted sage, leading like a wisdom keeper, or leading like a wise one for the impact on your team. Okay, that's the second one, is spiritual gifts, both what they are and how to use them. 3, we're going to do 3 and 4 together. So 3/4 are connection to God. You could also say goddess if that's your jam. Connection to God/goddess, and connection to your higher self. And we're going to say 3 is connection to God, goddess. 4 is connection to your higher self. And I'm lumping them together for a reason. So think of God/goddess as the sun or the moon. And the light that comes off of the sun or the moon are like the beams, the energy beams. And your higher self is just closer to the source along those beams. Your higher self is not God or goddess or whomever you believe in. Your higher self is just on a wave of light that's closer to it. So working on the level of reconnecting you to God/goddess is huge. It facilitates both energetic healing, which is very different than the personal healing. It has everything to do with soul retrieval and ancestral healing. And the part about your higher self is about reconnecting to the aspect of yourself that's much closer to God. This is different than the spiritual gifts that I mentioned before. It's about being a higher level of who you be. It's about embodying the higher level aspect of who you be. So that's 3/4, connection to God/goddess and connection to your higher self. Okay. Number 5, what's the 5th thing you need? What's the 5th thing that must be addressed for spiritual integration to occur? Number 5 is your body. And this is honoring your body in the whole process. Everything from releasing emotions through your body to the right movement practices, the right food and nourishment, and the rest patterns that work for you. This has to do with somatic and emotional processes, body-based and emotional processes. This has to do with movement practices, and this has to do with nutrition and rest. FYI, there is no one size fits all for any of this. Okay, so the first thing is this. You and I will be addressing most of the rest of this list. We'll be breaking down the list more in depth in the rest of the series. Okay, so if you just want to do the videos, this list will be partially addressed in this series. The next thing is, if you want to work privately with me, the best thing to do is not to rely on the videos alone, because they're like 1% of the equation. The best thing to do is to book a spiritual integration strategy session. This is not a sales call. This is not a play around call. This is a working session where you and I go on a sacred scavenger hunt for fragmented parts of your spirit. We find what is missing on the inside that you require for your next levels of leadership, legacy, and impact on the outside. And I'll put the link for that in the comments after this ends, so you guys will have a link to this. So let's touch upon what happens as you address these 5 core parts and repair spiritual fractures and move towards spiritual integration, with the understanding that subsequent videos are going to give you a whole lot more on this. 1, you retrieve lost soul parts from trauma and integrate them. As a result of this, your leadership style and communication patterns improve, and you lead with more clarity, power, and ease. 2, you become clear on what your spiritual gifts are and how to apply them for maximum impact on the collective. As a result of this, you create a larger impact in your own work, potentially one that lasts for generations, as well as on your team. 3, you deepen your connection to God and your higher self. Separate topics. Remember, if you want to use goddess, use goddess. While these are separate aspects, they are closely intertwined. You embody the highest levels of who you are. Others treat you differently. Doors open, opportunities show up around you. And you receive clarity on the larger picture and your true spiritual lineage and the legacy that you are truly meant to create. 4, your physical health and emotional ease improve as you release emotional weight and emotional baggage. This relates to decreased stress, more emotional bandwidth, and clearer decision making. And all of this integration flows right into legacy level impact. So if you'd like to move forward on this journey, I have 2 invitations for you. The first invitation is to book a spiritual integration strategy session. This is a working session where you and I together go on a sacred scavenger hunt for fragmented parts of your spirit. We find out what is missing on the inside that you need for your next levels of leadership, legacy, and impact on the outside. We will literally be going through the 5-part process on this call, mapping out exactly what is going on with you and leaving you with a blueprint of next steps. To be totally clear, this is not a free call. This is not a sales call. It is a paid call where you get right on it and dive right into doing the work. Okay, I'll put that link for you for that in the comments. The second invitation is to continue on this live stream journey with me. We will be addressing topics from leadership, impact, and trauma in the collective to connection to God and calling your higher self down into form for legacy level impact. And if anybody wants to sign up for my list and to be on the list for updates, I will add a sign up link for updates in the comments as well. And we just sailed right past 34 on the recording. Okay, I'm going to end this here.